Good morning. Late September 2022. Looking today at the Queen's chart, Queen Elizabeth II, who died last week and is being buried tomorrow. And looking at the King, the new King Charles's chart here. This is the Queen's birth chart, and taking note, pointing out some of the interesting things in her birth chart. What is prominent and jumps right out at you is her birth Saturn, sitting at the top of the chart so powerfully. Saturn, the ruler of Capricorn. Capricorn, the sign sitting on the eastern horizon at the moment she was born. Her ascending sign, telling us how she interacts with the world on the surface. Her outer personality traits, Capricorn, ruled by Saturn. All about order and discipline and organization, efficiency, the systems and structures of society. Saturn is all about duty, tradition, patriarchy, the strength of society from traditional content and bureaucracy. This is Saturn, and she truly, truly lived it. Mars and Jupiter in the first house, in Aquarius. Abundant physical energy, Mars being the planet of our assertiveness and our outgoing physical drive and energy. Jupiter enlarging everything in her birth chart. Jupiter, Mars conjunct in that first house. Lots of energy. In Aquarius, Aquarius is focused on all of humanity, and she was interested in the whole world and all people, especially the unusual ones. A great deal of focus and energy in her birth chart, certainly on possessions and finances. Imagine having all of that to worry about. All of the many, 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 many paintings and objects of art and palaces, and unfathomable to keep track of it all, but she did think about it a great deal. Mercury in the second house at birth. The Sun in Taurus, of course, telling us who she is down deep, loyal, stable, stubborn, sensible, not complicated, very family oriented. That's the Sun, Taurus. The Moon, Leo. Part of her personality, of course, was conditioned towards royalty and regal behaviors and activities, and no doubt she was well trained to be a queen. Built right into her nature, inherent in her personality. What's notable to me is the Pluto in the sixth house here. The sixth house is the house of service, the house of our work. And here we see her planet of power. So she saw power and her position of power in connectedness to service and work. Now it's interesting, Uranus, that transiting energy that takes a lifetime to make one full cycle in our lives, that planet that triggers change. That's its job, is to initiate action and new starts, and it brings in change, sometimes karmic, sometimes it pushes people to initiate the change. But when Uranus was on the Sun in her life, this was when her uncle quit being the king to marry Wally Simpson, and her father got stuck with the job being the king, and she found out as a little girl she in fact was going to have a life in the future where she would be the queen. And that was when Uranus hit her Sun. She found that out. Uranus continued transiting along in her life, and it was interesting that when it connected precisely with Pluto, the planet of power, which was in her house of service and work at birth, Uranus, the planet of sudden starts, new change, hit her Pluto exactly when her father died, and she became the queen. She ended up with the power there, and she saw that power as part of a job. Now, of course, Uranus has made it fully around and it has been sitting fully completed its cycle. She completed her job with Uranus in this lifetime. Highly notable at this time, what's going on in the Queen's chart as she's dying, the planet of death, Pluto, is sitting here on her ascending sign. And Pluto, transiting along, entered into this area of her chart and started sitting on her personal self and her personal body. Pluto, the planet of endings and beginnings, the planet of death, precisely as her husband, Prince Philip, died. And all that for the last year, for the whole last 13, 14 months, Pluto has been sitting, the planet of death, hovering around the Queen's body and around her personality and her persona. Pluto has been just hovering there. Now, Saturn, which has that 30-year cycle, which started so prominently in her chart, this position of authority, this position of responsibility, and this position of duty, it was sitting precisely on top of her Mars, her planet of energy, and her Jupiter, sitting right here on top of these for the last 2 weeks. And then we see her passing. Notable as well, as she has passed and left this life, left her body, Jupiter is sitting on Mercury. Now, Jupiter does travel around once every 12 years, but still it's sitting precisely on her Mercury. Mercury symbolizes your mind, your conscious mind, how you think, how you perceive. It is part of the nervous system. So here we have Jupiter, the planet of higher learning and higher philosophical perspectives, travel, prosperity, optimism, hope, this wonderful planet sitting right on top of her Mercury. As she is dying, and during this period of mourning and through her funeral, this Jupiter sits here on her Mercury. Most interesting. So what's going on with Charles? Well, he's very, very different than the Queen. Very, very different. Of course, he was born in a different time period. A different time in history. So Charles, we don't see any Saturn here at the top. No emphasis on duty as far as him taking care of the world, him taking care of the whole United Kingdom. The Queen seemed to believe or feel, or part of her experience in this world was this sense of taking care of everything. The whole United Kingdom as well. So much of the Commonwealth and the other countries. Charles, we see the sun in Scorpio. Now he's passionate. He feels things. He's going to express very, very differently. And we see Leo on the rising sign. Pluto in the first house, not in the house of service and work. No, the planet of power is in the first house with King Charles. So he was born to be king and he knew it. His power is inherent in him simply being himself. He is the king. He does have the power, and he has been waiting a very, very long time to put plans in action, I'm sure. And I'm sure he will do things very differently than his mother did within the bounds and rules and regulations that he can. Saturn is in his financial house, the house of finances and possessions. It's very well aspected. He is very responsible and very serious about his financial responsibilities. If you look at what he's been doing for the last 50 years while he's been the Prince of Wales, he in fact has made some very wise investments in terms of the, I believe it's called the Duchy of Cornwall, the piece of land and the chunk of territory he inherited. He really invested and made wise decisions in regards to that, and that's now very stable financially. And he will probably try to do the same thing with the whole picture of the royal family and this incredible wealth of art and property and history that this family has inherited to somehow take care of as well as enjoy and use and live in, sort of like living in a museum. But Saturn is where his duty lies and his responsibility lies, in the second house, the house of possessions and finances and income. So he may work hard towards making the whole monarchy smaller, less complicated, and more efficient financially. He too has Mars-Jupiter conjunct, exuberant amounts of physical energy available for this work. And he will be a very public king, with the moon in the 10th house. Not that he feels responsible and dutiful and will always appear exactly the same. He'll be far more colorful and more emotionally in contact with people. Again, he's a very emotionally based water sign, a Scorpio man. Uranus is in the 11th house here. Long-term goals and aspirations. Unusual, different, modernistic. So again, he is going to be focused on as much change within the monarchy as he's allowed to make it more efficient. But he indeed will be a public king, and he'll wear his power in a very personal way. And interestingly enough, when Uranus made contact with Pluto in the Queen's chart was when her father died and she became the Queen. In Charles's chart, we know that Saturn is sitting at 18 degrees of Taurus, of Aquarius right now. And we know Uranus is sitting at 18 degrees of Taurus right now. They're squaring each other. I recently did that video on this disruptive sudden change taking place in our society, coming at us from different directions potentially for many more weeks yet. But this same disruptive energy that can be activated in individual charts, people with planets at 16, 17, 18 degrees of the fixed signs, this has certainly been affecting Charles. Uranus squaring Pluto, the planet of power, activating his power. And this configuration that's affecting us right now for the world is part of how the energy manifests in Charles's chart, King Charles's chart. And what's he thinking about? The Queen was thinking about all of her money and her stuff and her art and all of her material responsibilities a great deal of the time. And Charles is thinking about the castles and the palaces and all the real estate and the land and the thousands of acres that he's going to have to take care of. Imagine having many, many, many ancient palaces that somehow in some vague way you were responsible for. At least in some respects. An interesting life. Just for fun, something to think about looking at these charts. Take care.